In the darkness before the first dawn, a single spark flares to life, lighting the edge of an ancient world. You hear it before you see it. A low rising hum, like iron waking beneath the earth. Shadows stretch across forgotten valleys, carrying whispers of love, pride, war, discovery, and the quiet survival of countless generations, learning to shape the very bones of the land. Across continents, fires are kindled, empires rise, families dream, and humanity stands on the brink of a transformation that will echo through millennia. Hear the ring of metal meeting metal. Sense the world holding its breath as a new age begins. As you listen, imagine yourself standing there, beside the fire, at the edge of history. What would you notice first? The heat on your skin, the crackle of the flames, or the quiet realization that everything, absolutely everything, is about to change? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell me where in the world you're listening from, and whether it's morning, evening, or night for you. And if this journey into the past brings you calm and wonder, gently tap like and subscribe so you never miss a night beneath the ancient stars. Now dim your screen, let the air grow still, and step with me into the story. When the first ember touched the raw stone, and something unexpected began to gleam, the world itself seemed to lean closer, as if listening for the faintest whisper of change. The night around that ancient hearth was quiet, broken only by the crackle of burning wood and the soft murmur of wind slipping between low hills. In this place, neither village nor wilderness, but something in between, a small gathering of early smiths watched a strange transformation unfold before their eyes. They had known fire all their lives. They had shaped it, feared it, relied upon it. Yet tonight, the glow revealed something new. A dark lump, once no different from the other stones scattered across the valley, had begun to soften. It glimmered faintly, as though starlight had fallen upon it and decided to stay. The people around the fire leaned in, faces warmed by the heat, breaths shallow with wonder. No one spoke at first. In a world where most discoveries were made slowly, through seasons of patience, experimentation, and quiet observation, this was a moment that felt almost sudden. One could imagine the gentle uncertainty that settled over them. Was this a gift from the fire spirits they believed in? A trick of the night? Or something hidden within the earth itself that they had never noticed before? The oldest among them, a broad-shouldered man with soot-darkened hands, reached toward the glowing lump using a long curved tool carved from horn. He tested its surface cautiously. The stone did not crumble. Instead, it bent, subtle, but undeniable. A soft gasp spread around the circle. The people saw it too. This was not like the brittle copper they sometimes found, nor the familiar stones they shaped into blades. This was something heavier, more stubborn, yet somehow more willing to be changed by heat and intention. As the night deepened, the stars continued their slow migration overhead, while the fire burned low and hot. Sparks drifted skyward like tiny glowing insects. The old man placed the softened material onto a flat stone and tapped it with another. The sound was muted, almost shy. But with each tap, the shape shifted, becoming smoother, flatter, more deliberate. Such moments are easy to overlook when seen from the great distance of history. Yet imagine yourself sitting there in the firelight, feeling the warmth against your skin and the softness of cool night air at your back. Imagine watching a simple stone become something else entirely. Something strong, something workable, something that promised possibilities no one could yet name. For those early people, life was shaped by the materials they could touch. Stone gave them sharp edges, but stone broke easily. Copper could be melted, but it was soft and delicate. They had learned to coax many gifts from the earth, but iron, though it surrounded them in vast deposits, had remained a secret. It lay hidden in the soil, in meteorites that sometimes fell from the sky, in dark veins beneath hills they walked across every day. But without enough heat, iron refused to change its form. It waited. Tonight, though, that waiting came to an end. The group around the fire did not yet know what they were seeing, but they felt its importance in a way that lived not in words, but in the quiet beating of their hearts. The air was thick with a sense of discovery, not loud or triumphant, but gentle, curious, and almost reverent. Even the children, curled near the edge of the circle, sensed the weight of the moment and watched with wide, wondering eyes. A woman with braided hair approached to study the piece more closely. She held her hands near the glowing surface, feeling its warmth. As the old man tapped the softened iron again, she noticed the color shift, from bright orange to deep red, then to a darker hue that shimmered under the dying firelight. "It holds," she murmured softly, though her language would have been ancient, its sounds rolling like pebbles in a stream. "It holds its shape." The others nodded, their faces lit by the last flickers of flame. When dawn approached, the horizon brightened with a gentle wash of pale gold. The embers settled into a bed of soft ash. Birds began their first tentative calls, welcoming another day. The air cooled as the fire died, but the small iron fragment retained its heat for longer than expected. When the sun finally rose high enough to warm the valley, the people gathered again around the cooled object. What they found surprised them once more. The dark piece had hardened into a firmness unlike any material they had worked before. It was heavier than copper, but not brittle like stone. It bore the marks of the old man's tools, each tap recorded in its surface. It felt grounded, sturdy, and promising in a way that they could not yet articulate. One of the younger members of the group, a boy with sharp eyes and quick hands, picked it up and turned it slowly. His imagination stirred immediately. He could see something within the shape, something not yet made, but waiting. Perhaps a blade sharper than flint, or a point strong enough to carve new patterns into wood or bone. The possibilities hovered just beyond his understanding, but he felt them all the same. The adults observed him with a soft mixture of amusement and respect. Young minds often sensed future paths before elders fully recognized them. As the morning unfolded, the people began preparing another fire, this time with greater intention. They gathered the darker stones they now suspected held this strange potential. They arranged the wood carefully, shaping the hearth to hold heat more efficiently. They positioned the stones in the hottest center, waiting for the flames to grow strong enough to pull the hidden metal into the open again. In this simple act, stacking wood, arranging stones, tending fire, a new chapter in human history quietly began. The discovery did not spread quickly. It would take generations before iron became common. It would take even longer before people learned to refine it, strengthen it, and shape it into tools that changed their lives. Yet the seed was planted here, in the slow glow of a single fire on a quiet night. Imagine the sense of wonder they must have felt as more iron emerged, piece by piece. Imagine the satisfaction of shaping something stronger than anything they had used before. These early smiths were not only craftsmen, they were dreamers, patient observers, and gentle experimenters guided by curiosity rather than conquest. Around them, the world continued as it always had. Rivers flowed, winds shifted across plains, animals grazed in distant meadows. But something subtle had changed. In this small valley, humans had discovered a new way to work with the earth, a way that would one day reshape villages, landscapes, and entire civilizations. The first iron fragments lay in a small pile by midday, each unique in shape and size. The people touched them, arranged them, studied their surfaces, and though no one could yet imagine the tools, structures, and journeys this metal would eventually enable, they sensed, in the quiet unfolding of the morning, that something meaningful had begun. The wind brushed softly through tall grasses as the hearth crackled new. The fire was lit again, and with it, human history began to tilt gently toward a new age, carried forward not by noise, but by careful hands and the soft glow of transformation. And so, the dawn of the Iron Age rose slowly, like the sun itself, not in a single burst of brilliance, but in a warm, steady light that touched the world one hearth at a time. As the fire grew hotter and the first true experiment of ironworking continued into the day. As the fire grew hotter and the first true experiment of ironworking continued into the day, the world beyond that quiet valley was stirring with its own rhythms. Somewhere past the hills, small clusters of early villages were beginning their morning routines. These settlements were not yet shaped by iron, but the faint echoes of the new discovery, though distant, would one day reach them and change everything. For now, life moved gently, guided by the cycles of the seasons, the needs of the land, and the heartbeat of community. The sun crept higher, lending its warmth to the waking world. Thin smoke curled from thatched roofs as hearths were rekindled. The scent of damp earth mixed with the fragrant hint of herbs drying in the morning air. Goats called softly from enclosures made of woven branches. Clay pots clinked. Feet brushed lightly over packed soil. These villages had grown slowly over generations. They were built not in straight lines or planned grids, but in the organic shapes allowed by the land itself. Paths meandered like lazy streams between dwellings formed of wood, mud, and straw. Each home had its own small patch of ground where vegetables grew in quiet rows and tools were stored against outer walls. In the earliest Iron Age communities, the rhythm of life was peaceful, unhurried, and deeply intertwined with nature. Yet beneath this gentle surface lay currents of transformation. A young woman named Raina stepped out of her family's dwelling, brushing straw from her hands. Her hair was tied loosely with a strip of dyed wool, its colour faded by sun and time. She moved toward the small communal space at the village's centre, where others were already gathering. These early villages depended on cooperation. No task was done alone for long. The raising of walls, the tending of fields, the crafting of tools. These were shared responsibilities, carried lightly by many hands. Raina approached the hearth, where the morning fire burned steadily. A few elders knelt beside it, warming their palms and discussing the day's plans. One spoke of new shoots appearing in the barley field. Another mentioned strange weather on the horizon, clouds flowing from the east with an unfamiliar shape. The villagers listened, nodding with quiet attention. In a time without written calendars or recorded forecasts, every shift in wind or pattern of birds mattered. As Raina listened, she held a small basket of grain. Her task today was simple: help sift and grind the barley for the midday meal. But she enjoyed this work, not only for its routine, but for the moments of conversation it allowed. People shared stories while grinding grain. They spoke of dreams, of small worries, of livestock, of seasons, of youthful hopes. These exchanges bound the community together as tightly as any woven rope. Nearby, a group of children played with sticks and stones, pretending to build tiny villages of their own. They arranged pebbles into circles representing homes. They stuck twigs upright for men and women. They even imitated the voices of elders discussing the weather. Their chatter rose above the quiet conversations of adults, adding a sweet liveliness to the morning. In another corner of the village, a man named Terev checked the tools that hung along the outer wall of a storage hut. He examined each carefully: small copper blades, stone axes, bone awls, and wooden handles bound with leather strips. Though useful, these tools carried limitations the villagers had learned to accept. Copper bent easily, stone chipped, wooden edges dulled quickly. Still, this was the world they knew, and they had shaped a stable life with the materials available to them. Yet Terev paused when he picked up a small object no bigger than his palm, a piece of dark, dense material that he had found near a riverbank weeks ago. He didn't know it was iron, not truly, but he sensed something unusual about it. Unlike most stones, it did not break when struck. It was heavier than it appeared. And though he couldn't shape it with his current tools, something deep within him felt drawn to it. He ran his thumb over the surface, wondering again what it might be. Raina, carrying her basket, approached and noticed his thoughtful expression. "You're holding that stone again," she said lightly, not teasing, but curious. Terev nodded. "It feels different." Raina tilted her head, studying it. "Do you think it means something?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think the earth hides things we have not yet learned." She smiled softly. "Then perhaps one day the earth will reveal them." Such conversations, though simple, hinted at an openness to discovery that would one day make iron an everyday part of life. The gentle curiosity of early villagers created fertile ground for innovation. At mid-morning, the village hummed with activity. Women wove baskets from reeds collected near the river. Men tended to the fields or repaired animal pens. Children helped by carrying small bundles of wood or gathering herbs. The scent of ground barley drifted through the air as Raina and another woman worked with rhythmic motions, grinding grain between flat stones. The method was slow, but the movements were soothing. A steady, circular motion accompanied by the faint scrape of stone against stone. As noon approached, a soft breeze flowed through the village, carrying with it a whisper of cooler air. The elders paused and turned their faces to the sky. They did not fear the changing weather, but they observed it with the same attentiveness that guided every aspect of their lives. Raina joined them briefly, shading her eyes as she looked toward the distant hills. "The clouds are moving quickly today. The wind brings news," an elder said quietly. "Sometimes it brings change." Raina wondered what kind of change such clouds might carry. She had never travelled far beyond the village and knew little of what lay beyond the hills. Other communities, distant forests, wide plains, and valleys full of secrets. The world felt both large and close, safe, yet filled with unseen possibilities. One elder, his hair braided with feathers, spoke softly. "There are rumours carried by travellers of new ways of working with metal, strange stories told by those who pass through the markets by the great river." Terev, overhearing, turned toward them. "New metals, so they say. Harder than what we know, but stories travel like birds. Sometimes they carry truth, and sometimes only wind." Raina felt a quiet stirring inside her. Not fear, but anticipation. She looked again at the clouds, imagining what unknown hands might be shaping in distant valleys. Could someone, somewhere, have found a way to melt stone into something strong? The thought lingered long after the conversation drifted on. By afternoon, the village's gentle hum settled into a peaceful rhythm. Meals were shared. Crafts were tended. Children rested in the shade of broad-leaved trees. The days in early Iron Age villages were filled not with grand events, but with countless small moments, each one shaping the slow evolution of society. As the sun began its descent, turning the sky into warm tones of honey and amber, Terev once again picked up the heavy stone fragment he had found. This time, he pressed it lightly against a piece of copper. The copper scratched, barely, but the stone did not. His heart beat a little faster. He didn't understand yet, but he felt the first spark of realization. Somewhere beyond the hills, iron was being shaped, quietly, experimentally, with cautious wonder. And though the knowledge had not yet reached this small village, the world was already shifting. These people, living their quiet lives, did not know they stood at the threshold of a new age. Around them, the evening deepened. Smoke rose gently from cooking fires. Voices drifted softly in the twilight. The first stars appeared, shimmering faintly above the rooftops. And in the stillness of early night, as the village settled into sleep, Terev placed the strange stone beside his bedding, his thoughts glowing as quietly as an ember beneath ashes. He did not yet know that the world was warming toward change, but he felt it. And somewhere far away, in a valley lit by a bright, steady hearth, iron glowed again, ready to reshape the lives of people like him, carrying its quiet promise into the next days and the next generations. Carrying its quiet promise into the next days and the next generations, the presence of that dark, heavy stone continued to rest in Terev's thoughts, like a softly glowing ember. Life in the village moved forward in its gentle rhythm, yet beneath that calm surface, something subtle had begun to shift. Not in loud changes or sudden discoveries, but in the quiet awareness that the world held mysteries still waiting to be shaped. Morning light spilled over the fields as the village stirred awake. Dew clung to barley stalks, sparkling like tiny crystals. The scent of damp soil rose into the cool air as farmers moved slowly between the rows, checking new growth and preparing for the day's work. Harvests were the lifeblood of early communities, and the tools they used determined how far their efforts could reach. Raina walked among the fields with a woven basket in her hands, collecting herbs that grew wild along the edges. She paused to touch the leaves of a tall plant, feeling their softness against her fingertips. Every part of village life required attentiveness, listening to the land, watching the skies, learning what the earth could offer. Though no one in the village had yet worked iron, the desire to improve their tools and methods already lived quietly within them. Near the communal workshop area, Terev knelt beside a row of tools laid out for repair. Copper sickles with curved blades, stone hatchets sharpened again and again, wooden handles worn smooth from years of use. He examined each one with patient eyes, appreciating the craftsmanship even as he recognized their limitations. They chipped, bent, or dulled with time, and replacing them required constant attention. As he worked, the mysterious iron-bearing stone lay nearby on a small wooden plank, its surface dark and unremarkable to anyone who didn't look closely. But Terev had begun to study it with a quiet fascination. Something inside him sensed its potential. Although he didn't yet know how to release the metal it held, he believed the answer was hidden in fire, the same force that had revealed so much to early humans already. Raina wandered over and knelt beside him. "You've been thinking about that stone again." Terev nodded, brushing soil from his palms. "It doesn't behave like the others. I struck it with copper again today. The copper bent. The stone did not." She leaned in, her expression soft but intrigued. "Perhaps it belongs with the hearth workers. Maybe they would know more." "Perhaps," he murmured, though he doubted it. Those who tended the fires knew how to warm clay, harden pottery, or heat metal for shaping. But this material felt different, as though it required something beyond ordinary flames. Yet the thought of involving others stirred something hopeful within him. As the day grew warmer, the villagers gathered for shared tasks. Some carried baskets of grain to the grinding stones. Others repaired nets or shaped wooden handles for tools. The gentle clatter of activity created a soft harmony. The steady scrape of stone against barley, the muffled tapping of wood, the laughter of children darting between dwellings. In the centre of the village, elders met again, speaking quietly of seasonal patterns, travel rumours, and distant lands. Stories flowed between them like water, tales from travellers who claimed to have seen strange glowing metal in other regions, shaped by those who lived far from these fields. Terev listened from a distance, his heart stirring. Could the discovery he imagined already exist elsewhere? Could others have learned to shape this hidden metal? It was a thought that filled him with both excitement and humility. Later, a group of villagers headed to the river to gather smooth stones and wild reeds for weaving. Raina joined them, walking with her feet brushing through soft grass. The river was a calm ribbon of silver under the afternoon sun, its surface broken only by darting fish and drifting leaves. The sound of flowing water always soothed her. It reminded her that life moved at its own pace, slow but persistent. She knelt near the bank to collect reeds, and as she worked, her gaze caught sight of something half buried in the soil, a stone darker than the rest. She brushed away the dirt and picked it up. It was not large, but it had weight, the same dense feel as the fragment Terev often carried. Her breath caught softly. She turned the stone in her palm. Could there be more of these scattered through the valley? Had their ancestors walked past them for generations without realizing what they held? That evening, she brought the stone to Terev. "I found this near the river," she said, offering it to him. He took it carefully, examining its surface. "It looks the same. It feels the same." Raina's voice dropped, as though the night itself were listening. Maybe the valley has been holding these for longer than we know. Maybe we simply haven't understood them. Terev stared at the dark fragment, sensing the truth in her words. Then perhaps, he said slowly, we should try to learn. The decision was not a grand announcement. It was a quiet agreement, a shared spark of curiosity. But in the history of human progress, it is often such small promises, made by ordinary people in ordinary moments, that guide entire generations forward. Together they brought the stones to the hearth workers, who greeted them with gentle interest. The fire crackled warmly, casting soft orange light across their faces. One hearth worker, an older woman with deep-set eyes, studied the stones thoughtfully. These are not like the others, she said. They wake differently in the fire. Wake? Terev echoed. She smiled faintly. All stones respond to fire in their own way. Some break, some strengthen, some melt. These, her fingers brushed the dark surface. These may reveal something if the fire is hot enough. The group prepared the hearth with care. They arranged sturdy branches and dry twigs, building the flames slowly. Sparks rose in gentle spirals, drifting upward like glowing seeds carried by the wind. As the fire grew, they placed the stones in its heart. The heat pressed against their skin, warm but not yet unbearable. The stones darkened, reddened faintly, then glowed weakly, not melting, but softening just a breath. It needs more heat, the hearth worker murmured, her eyes narrowing. More air, more breath of fire. They fed the flames with additional wood, creating a deeper glow that pulsed with life. Slowly the stones responded. A small bead of bright metal appeared along the edge of one fragment. Terev inhaled sharply. There, the woman whispered. There is something inside. Raina felt a tremor of awe run through her. It was only the smallest glimmer, barely a droplet, but it was enough to confirm the truth. The earth had been holding a secret, and they had just begun unlocking it. As the firelight flickered against the evening sky, the villagers sat in quiet wonder, watching the first hints of iron emerge. They did not yet know how difficult the path ahead would be, how much heat, time, and skill true ironworking required. But they felt the first steps settling into place, warm and hopeful as embers in a hearth. The night deepened around them, peaceful and vast. And somewhere beyond their small fires, other communities, far away, yet part of the same unfolding story, were beginning to feel the first sparks of the Iron Age as well. A gentle revolution carried forward by curiosity, patience, and the soft glow of possibility. A gentle revolution carried forward by curiosity, patience, and the soft glow of possibility. Yet the changes ignited in that small village did not remain quietly by the hearth for long. Across valleys, rivers, and distant plains, other communities were experiencing their own quiet discoveries, each one a tiny spark contributing to the slow dawn of a new age. By the time the next season arrived, the faint knowledge of iron, though still primitive and uncertain, had begun to drift like a soft breeze through neighbouring regions. Travellers who passed between settlements carried more than woven goods or dried herbs in their baskets. They carried stories of warmer fires, harder stones, and metals that held their shape even after the flames died. These tales, whispered in marketplaces and on dusty paths, floated from one region to another. Some dismissed them as exaggerations. Others listened with wonder. but a few felt the pull of possibility stirring deeply within their hearts. In one such village, not far from Raina and Terev's home, a small gathering of leaders met beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree. The trunk was wide enough for 3 people to sit comfortably against it, and its leaves rustled softly above them like a patient listener. The elder known as Saralan spoke first. His voice was low, but it carried across the circle. The traders from the south bring news again. They speak of people who shape a dark metal that does not bend as copper does. A middle-aged woman named Lyra, known for her keen judgment, frowned slightly. We have heard such claims before. Stone, copper, bone. These have served us well. Why chase after something unproven? Saralan turned a smooth pebble in his palm, feeling its cool surface. Because change has a way of arriving, whether we pursue it or not. The others nodded slowly, sensing truth in his words. They had seen signs already. Tools wore down too quickly. The forests they harvested for wooden instruments grew thinner each year. Predator tracks appeared in new places as animals shifted their ranges. The climate brought unpredictable seasons. Too much rain one year, too little the next. Life was becoming more demanding, and the communities that adapted would thrive. Meanwhile, in Raina's village, the hearth workers continued their experiments with the strange dark stones. True iron, workable, shapeable, strong, still eluded them. The fires flickered, glowed, and dimmed, but the temperatures needed to fully release and refine iron were far beyond what their simple hearths could produce. Yet even small successes inspired determination. Terev watched closely as the older hearth worker, the woman who had first recognized the stone's potential, adjusted the fire's structure. She crafted a new design, a deeper pit surrounded by thicker clay walls, angled vents carved to funnel air through more efficiently. When she blew into a hollow bone tube, directing wind into the fire's core, the flames surged upward with renewed intensity. Raina felt the heat on her face. "It's stronger," she whispered. "Still not strong enough," the woman murmured, though her eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "But each step brings us closer." The villagers observed these experiments with a mixture of fascination and warmth. This was not change pushed upon them. It was change growing gently from within, like a seed sprouting in fertile soil. In the evenings, after work was done, people gathered around shared meals, speaking softly about what might come next. Some imagined tools that would remain sharp for seasons at a time. Others pictured new ways to build dwellings or defend against wolves. Raina, watching the firelight dance in the eyes of those around her, wondered what her children or grandchildren might someday know that she could not yet imagine. Beyond the valleys, the world was shifting as well. Travelers from distant lands described early chieftains rising in power. Not grand kingdoms yet, but the early forms of leadership that would one day grow into them. These leaders did not claim authority through force, not yet, but through organization, coordination, and the gentle weaving of communities into larger networks. With more people came more collaboration, more ideas, more need for tools that could endure. A young traveller named Harun arrived one late afternoon, his cloak dusty from the long journey. The villagers welcomed him with food and water, offering him a place near the communal fire. He spoke as he ate. In the far west, they build ovens inside the earth itself, deep, sealed structures that make fire hotter than anything I have ever seen. Terev leaned forward, interest awakening instantly. Hotter than a hearth? Hot enough, Harun replied, that the stones melt into metal, a metal stronger than copper, harder than stone. A soft hush spread around the fire. Raina's breath fluttered gently. Do they shape it? They do, Harun said, nodding. They make long blades, heavy axes, tools for farming, even ornaments. They say the metal is stubborn but faithful. If you learn how to shape it, it will serve you for a lifetime. The hearthworker's eyes gleamed in the firelight. Such a furnace, she murmured, thoughtful. Perhaps that is the secret. The traveller smiled. It is what they told me, and they say those who learn to control this fire gain great respect. That night, long after Harun had fallen asleep, the hearthworker, Terev, and Raina sat near the quiet embers. The moon drifted above them, silver and serene. A gentle breeze carried the scent of cooling clay and distant pine. We must try, Terev whispered. A deeper pit, a stronger wall, more air, more heat. Raina nodded softly. If others have done it, we can learn. The hearthworker placed a hand on each of their shoulders, her voice steady. Then we begin tomorrow, carefully, patiently. Fire rewards those who respect it. And so the next day marked the beginning of a new effort. The villagers watched as a deeper furnace was dug into the earth, lined with clay, reinforced with stones, and shaped to hold greater heat. Children peered into it with wide eyes. Elders murmured blessings for safety. The air became filled with the scent of drying clay as the structure hardened in the sun. When evening came, they lit the first fire within the new pit. Flames roared upward with surprising force, fueled by steady streams of air fed through narrow vents. The dark stones glowed brighter than ever. Raina watched, heart steady, breath slow. She felt as though she were witnessing not just a fire, but a doorway opening. One that connected her small village to the wider world. All around them, early communities across plains, coasts, and river valleys were taking similar steps. Not in perfect unison, but like stars appearing one by one in an evening sky. The Iron Age was not a single moment. It was a gathering of quiet choices, of small innovations, of communities slowly learning to shape the future with their own hands. And with each new flame, the foundations of early kingdoms and long roads of trade began to take form, carried gently by rising winds. Carried gently by rising winds, the knowledge of stronger fires and deeper furnaces began to drift along the early trade routes that stitched the ancient world together. These routes were not yet the grand roads of later empires, nor the bustling markets that would one day hum with distant voices. Instead, they were humble paths, foot-worn trails, river crossings, ridgelines watched by patient birds, travelled by wanderers, traders, and families who carried the slow pulse of civilization from one settlement to the next. As the seasons passed, those simple paths grew more defined. Trails became tracks, tracks became routes, and routes became the earliest lifelines through which ideas, metals, stories, and hopes travelled gently between communities. In Raina and Terev's village, the new earth furnace had begun yielding its first small drops of iron. The metal was still impure, still mixed with lumps of stubborn stone, but it glowed with a promise that thrilled the observers gathered around the fire. When cooled, the fragments felt heavy and solid, mysterious, still difficult to shape, yet undeniably different from anything they had known before. Terev often spent evenings turning these pieces in his hands, studying their surfaces in the dim light. "Imagine," he whispered one night as the sun dipped behind the hills, "a blade that lasts for many harvests, a tool that cuts through roots without bending, a plough that does not crack when the earth is dry." Beside him, Raina watched the fire's reflection shimmer across the cooling metal. "Imagine," she said softly, "the paths that could connect villages if they shared such tools." The idea struck him with a quiet force. Roads had always existed, but the work of maintaining them, clearing rocks, cutting brush, carving steps into hillsides, was difficult with tools that dulled so easily. Stronger metal could make the land itself more passable, linking communities in ways that had not yet been possible. The thought lingered like a warm ember. A few days later, a small group of traders arrived from the neighbouring valley. Their arrival was greeted with soft smiles, warm food, and water for their weary feet. They carried baskets filled with simple goods: woven cloth, dried berries, carved wooden charms, and, more importantly, stories. One of the traders, a woman with deep-set eyes and a cloak patched with many journeys, gestured toward the new furnace. "I saw something like this near the river far to the south," she said. "Their fires burn like suns. They shape metal that glows white before it cools." Terev felt a ripple of excitement. "Have you seen the tools they make?" She nodded. "Knives that stay sharp after many cuts, axes that bite deep into wood. I even saw a farmer with a heavy blade fixed to a sturdy wooden shaft. He said it carried him through the hardest soil." Raina exchanged a glance with Terev, her heart warming with both wonder and certainty. "Then we are not alone," she whispered. "Far from it," the trader replied. "These paths we walk, they carry more than our feet. They carry change." As the visitors rested, they shared tales of distant places: hills with red soil rich in metal stones, forests cut by narrow clearings where travellers built small shelters, streams where fish swam in silver clusters, and valleys where communities gathered to trade under the open sky. These gatherings, early trade fairs, though no one called them that yet, were the first signs of something larger. People brought grain, hides, tools, pottery, and stones. They exchanged not only goods, but knowledge. A new fire-making method from one region might travel hundreds of miles simply because a curious traveller asked the right question. A new weaving pattern might appear in distant villages, spread by the gentle hands of those who admired it. And now, subtly, quietly, iron was entering this woven fabric of exchange. In their own village, Raina and Terev began to witness changes already. The iron fragments, though small, opened new possibilities. They tested them in different fires, hammered them upon flat stones, experimented with techniques whispered to them by travellers. The progress was slow, often frustrating, but every small success brightened the mood of the village. One morning, Terev managed to shape a crude edge, not sharp yet, not truly a tool, but something that held its form even when struck against wood. His heart leapt. He brought it immediately to Raina. She held it carefully. "It feels different, stronger," he nodded. "It is small, but imagine a larger piece." Raina looked out over the fields, where barley shimmered in the morning wind. "Imagine what our children might harvest." Word of these early experiments began to ripple outward. Travellers stopped more frequently, drawn by rumours of a village learning to shape a stubborn metal. With each visitor came new pieces of information, ways to build hotter fires, ways to pump air through furnaces using animal skins, ways to cool iron slowly so it became less brittle. Raina listened carefully, storing each detail like a precious seed. As spring deepened, the village decided to send a small group to follow one of the well-known trade routes, not to wander aimlessly, but to seek knowledge, to observe how other communities used metal, how they built furnaces, how they carved paths across difficult landscapes. Terev was chosen to join this group, along with a young woman named Avin, whose sharp eyes and calm demeanour made her an excellent observer. Raina walked with them to the edge of the village the morning they departed. The sky glowed in pale gold and dew clung to the grass. Birds called softly from the treetops. "Bring back what you learn," she said, her voice warm and steady. Terev nodded. "And bring back stories." Avin smiled. Always stories. The path ahead was simple, a narrow trail cut through mountains of grass and wildflowers, but it was part of a broader network. As they walked, they passed small markers left by travellers, stacked stones, carved symbols, bundles of herbs tied to branches as offerings. These tiny signs created a sense of connection, letting wanderers know they followed a shared route, even across miles of open land. By midday, the group reached a crossroads where several trails met. The air here felt different, alive with subtle motion. People crossed from various directions, a fisher carrying nets over his shoulder, a shepherd leading a small flock, a pair of travellers exchanging dried fruit for small pottery pieces. Terev felt a thrill run through him. This crossroads was more than a physical meeting place. It was a crossroads of ideas. A group of strangers nearby displayed several metal objects on a woven mat. Terev approached carefully. One traveller noticed his fascination and offered him a small iron blade to examine. Terev held it with reverence. The blade was rough compared to later ages, but compared to the copper tools he knew, it felt remarkable, strong, dense, and purposeful. "How did you make this?" he asked. The traveller smiled. "By listening to the fire and learning its language." Avin leaned closer. "Will you teach us?" He nodded gently. "I can show you what I know. You will learn the rest yourselves." As the sun began to lower, Terev and Avin sat with the traveller and listened to stories of distant furnaces, bellows crafted from goat skins, charcoal made from slow-burning wood, and the delicate balance between air, heat, and time. Back in their home village, Raina tended the hearth and waited for their return. She imagined them crossing rivers, tracing paths through tall grasses, learning new ways to shape metal. She knew they would come back changed, carrying knowledge not in their hands, but in their hearts. And when they did return, the change they brought would ripple through the village like wind across a field, creating the first true pathways of iron in a world still mostly shaped by bronze and stone. Creating the first true pathways of iron in a world still mostly shaped by bronze and stone, the currents of change began to flow far beyond any single valley or settlement. These currents, subtle at first, slowly gathered strength as families, travellers, and entire communities began to move across grasslands, coastlines, forests, and mountain passes. Some wandered in search of richer soil. Others followed migrating herds, and many were drawn by whispers, rumours of stronger tools, brighter fires, and new ways of shaping the earth itself. Migration in the early Iron Age did not sweep across the land in sudden waves. It unfolded like the slow movement of rivers, carving new routes over generations. Here and there, families set out with woven packs, clay vessels, and hopeful hearts, feeling quietly that the world was expanding, calling them forward. As Terev and Avin continued their journey along the trade routes, they began to notice signs of this movement everywhere. Footprints layered on top of older footprints, temporary shelters built from reeds and branches, strips of worn earth where caravans had passed weeks before. Even the animals seemed to sense the shifting patterns. Deer trails bent toward new grazing grounds, and birds travelled in unfamiliar formations across the sky. One morning, as the travellers crossed a wide stretch of grassland shimmering under the early sun, they spotted a small group of families moving in the distance. Children rode on gentle oxen. Adults guided carts made from sturdy wood. Bundles hung from the sides, clinking softly with each step. The scent of dried herbs and cured meat drifted faintly on the wind. Avin raised her hand in greeting. The families slowed their pace, and soon both groups met on the open plain. A tall man with grey-streaked hair stepped forward. "We travel east," he said, "toward the river valleys. We hear the soil is rich there." Terev nodded. "Are you leaving your home behind?" The man's face softened with memory. "Not leaving," he said gently, carrying it forward. Behind him, a woman holding a sleeping child added, "We heard stories of villages learning to shape new metal, strong metal. If it is true, we hope to find such knowledge on our way." Avin smiled warmly. "It is true. We have seen it, and we are learning slowly." The group exchanged hopeful glances. "Then perhaps," the man said, "the world is opening for all of us." For a while, the two groups walked together. They shared dried fruit and cool water from a nearby stream. Children asked questions about Terev's village, their curiosity bright as sunlight, and when they finally parted ways, it felt less like a goodbye and more like threads gently diverging in a larger tapestry. The further Terev and Avin travelled, the clearer it became that migration was shaping the world as much as iron itself. Along coastal paths, they saw boats pulled onto sandy shores, small crafts carved from single tree trunks, and larger ones built with wooden planks bound by woven fibres. Fishermen mended nets while their families prepared to journey along the coast, following fish patterns that shifted with the seasons. At one such shoreline, Avin paused to watch the water. Waves rolled softly, their rhythm calming and eternal. "Do you think people will cross the sea one day?" she asked quietly. Terev considered. "Perhaps they already have." "Perhaps," she echoed, smiling at the thought of distant shores touched by the same winds. Nearby, a young sailor with sun-darkened skin showed them a curious object, a small iron hook attached to a wooden handle. "Traders from the north gave it to me," he explained. "They say their blacksmiths discovered how to melt the metal more completely. It holds strong even against salt water." Terev's heart stirred with excitement. "Could you show us how they use it?" The sailor demonstrated how the hook allowed fishermen to pull heavier traps or guide nets with greater ease. It was a small tool, humble in appearance, yet it represented something immense: the spreading reach of ironcraft across regions connected by water, not only land. As the days passed, Terev and Avin reached a hilly region where forests grew dense and fragrant. Here, migration took on a different form. Families did not travel in large groups, but moved quietly through the trees, often guided by hunters familiar with every rustling leaf. These forest communities wore garments dyed with deep earthy tones. Their tools, still mostly stone and bone, were beautifully carved but worn with time. When the travellers received permission to join one evening's gathering, they sat beneath massive branches hung with lanterns of hollowed gourds. Fireflies drifted lazily among the leaves, glowing like scattered stars brought down to earth. An elder of the forest people, her hair braided with dried flowers, studied the iron fragment Terev carried. She turned it slowly in her hands. "This metal," she murmured. "It feels like the bones of mountains." Terev nodded softly. "It is difficult to shape." She looked up, the firelight catching her eyes. "All things that change the world are." The forest people listened with deep interest as Avon explained the furnace they were learning to build, the need for hotter fires, and the air that must be guided into the flames with patience. Several of the community's young hunters leaned closer, fascinated. They asked about the strength of iron, how long it lasted, and whether it could be used to shape new arrowheads or wood-cutting tools. Terev answered each question gently, emphasizing the difficulties as much as the promise. "Iron is a stubborn friend," he said, "but once it chooses to be shaped, it holds strong." Their hosts nodded thoughtfully. "Then perhaps we should learn its ways," the elder said, "but only with care. The forest teaches us that every new gift must be taken with gratitude." That night, as the travellers lay beneath the trees, listening to the rustle of leaves and distant calls of nocturnal birds, Avon whispered, "It feels as if the whole world is listening for this new knowledge." "It is," Terev murmured, "and we must listen, too." The next morning, they continued their journey deeper into the region. They passed through valleys where herds of animals moved in sweeping patterns, their migrations shaping the paths humans followed. They crossed narrow bridges made from fallen logs. They heard rumors of communities far to the north who'd begun forging thin iron blades sharp enough to slice through thick hides. Everywhere they traveled, they saw the same mixture of curiosity and caution, hope and patience. People were moving more frequently now, carrying seeds, memories, tools, and dreams with them. And as they moved, they carried with them the whisper of iron, a whisper growing louder with each passing season. When Terev and Avon finally turned back toward their home village, their hearts were full. They carried not only the knowledge they had gathered, but a deeper understanding of how interconnected the world was becoming. They had met people from river valleys, forests, coastlines, and high plains. Each community unique, each moving gently into an age where stronger tools could support larger harvests, safer shelters, and new forms of trade. Along the final stretch toward home, Avon said softly, "When we return, everything will feel different." Terev smiled, "Because we are different." As the familiar shape of their village appeared over the hillside, smoke curling peacefully from its rooftops, the two travellers felt a warmth spread through them. The land had broadened their minds, strengthened their resolve, and shown them that migration, like fire, was a force that shaped the world quietly, steadily, and forever. And now, with new knowledge carried in their hearts, they stepped forward into the next chapter of their people's story, bringing with them the breath of distant lands, and the quiet promise of iron travelling across grasslands and seas. Bringing with them the breath of distant lands, and the quiet promise of iron travelling across grasslands and seas, Terev and Avin stepped back into the familiar rhythm of their village. Smoke curled gently from hearths. Children's laughter carried on the morning breeze. The fields shimmered with new growth as the wind rippled through barley stalks like waves across a golden sea. Yet even in these familiar sights and sounds, something felt changed. Not in the buildings or the people, but in the air itself. As if the village had grown just a little larger in spirit, touched by the distant places their travellers had seen. Raina was among the first to greet them. She hurried across the packed earth, her footsteps soft but filled with joy. "You're home," she breathed, pulling Avin into an embrace. "Tell me everything." Terev smiled, his face touched with dust from long travel. "We learned much, more than we hoped, and brought stories," Avin added, her eyes bright. "So many stories." Their return was met with a small gathering near the central hearth. Elders listened with quiet attentiveness. Children leaned forward with wide eyes. Farmers, basket weavers, shepherds, and hunters all gathered in a loose circle, eager for every detail. Terev spoke of coastal villages where iron tools helped fishermen pull heavier nets. He described forest communities building dwellings with axes that held their edge season after season. Avin told of mountain travellers who used iron-tipped poles to cross rocky passes more safely. Each story added a new spark to the growing sense of possibility that had already taken root in their village. But the greatest lesson they brought home was simple. Iron was not just a material. It was a teacher. It asked patience. It demanded respect. It required deeper fires, steadier hands, and a willingness to learn slowly. And so, daily life in the village began to shift in small, steady ways. Farmers continued to tend their fields as they always had, but now they listened with greater interest whenever the hearth workers spoke of their latest attempts to coax more iron from the furnace. These farmers knew the land intimately, knew the seasons, the needs of barley and lentils, the subtle signs of changing weather. They had long desired tools that would work with them instead of against them. Raina often visited the furnace after her morning tasks. She carried herbs to hang near the hearth, believing their scents brought calmness and clarity. "Iron feels alive," she told the hearth worker one day as they watched the flames swell. "Almost like it has its own will." "It does," the older woman replied. "But so does everything shaped by the earth. Clay, stone, water. Iron is simply more stubborn, more hidden." Raina nodded thoughtfully. "Then we will simply learn how to listen." Meanwhile, artisans in the village, potters, weavers, and carvers, found their own inspiration in the new metal. A potter named Yumil began experimenting with new clay mixtures, believing that stronger tools might help refine pottery shapes. A weaver created bold patterns reflecting the shapes of flames and furnace vents, turning the idea of ironworking into cloth designs that brightened the villagers' garments. Even children joined in this quiet creativity. They played games in which they pretended to be smiths, shaping imaginary metal over pretend fires. Sometimes they lined small stones in the sun, waiting to see if the heat changed them. Their laughter carried through the village like birdsong, reminding everyone that learning was not limited to adults. Curiosity lived in every age. Within the workshop area, the furnace continued to evolve. With knowledge gathered from distant communities, the hearth workers experimented with new techniques. Even helped shape animal skin bellows, simple but effective tools that forced more air into the fire, raising its temperature. Terev built sturdier frames to hold the bellows and openings that allowed flames to reach deeper into the furnace's belly. The first time they pumped the bellows together, the fire roared in a way the village had never heard before. A steady, powerful breath that seemed to kindle something in the hearts of everyone watching. Children stepped back in awe. Adults exchanged hopeful glances. The embers glowed brighter, hotter, more purposeful. Raina felt her heart swell. "The fire sings differently now," she whispered. "It sings louder," Terev replied, sweat beading on his brow as he worked the bellows. "And it teaches better." Late into the evening, the furnace produced its most promising iron yet. Not perfect, but more workable than anything the village had seen before. When they cooled it slowly, as the travellers had advised, the metal hardened in a more even way, its surface smoother and more responsive. They gathered around the cooling piece like people witnessing a sunrise. "It holds," Avon murmured. "It holds," the hearth worker echoed, her voice warm with pride. Life in the village continued. Fields were tended, meals were cooked, baskets were woven, but everything now held a subtle new energy. Each task felt part of a larger journey, woven into a greater change that extended far beyond the village itself. Farmers began to ask Terev when the first true iron blade might be ready. Hunters wondered how an iron-tipped spear might fly through the air. Artisans imagined tools that would let them carve more finely or cut more cleanly. The anticipation was gentle, never urgent, but undeniably present. One evening, Raina and Terev sat outside their dwelling as the twilight softened the edges of the world. Fireflies glowed near the fields, and the night smelled faintly of warm soil and fresh-cut herbs. "You've changed," Raina said softly. "Your eyes hold many new places." Terev leaned back against the wooden wall. "And you've changed too. You see iron not as a challenge, but as a companion." She smiled. "Perhaps it is both." He lifted a small fragment of iron shaped earlier that day, a piece no larger than a pebble, but dense and promising. "Do you think our children will live in a world where iron is commonplace?" Raina looked toward the furnace, where a faint red glow warmed the night. "Yes," she whispered, "and they will wonder how we ever lived without it." Across the village, the rhythmic pumping of the bellows slowed as the workers prepared to rest. The fire dimmed to a soft, steady glow, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Daily life resumed its familiar patterns, yet each day carried a touch of quiet expectation. Farmers, artisans, hunters, and hearth workers felt themselves part of something growing, something patient, hopeful, and steady. A transformation not only in metal, but in community, in cooperation, and in the gentle unfolding of human ingenuity. And as the night settled deeper around them, with stars emerging one by one, the village breathed with a sense of harmony, unaware of how far their small steps would reach across the world in the centuries to come. Unaware of how far their small steps would reach across the world in the centuries to come, the people of the village continued to shape their lives around the rhythm of the hearth and the gentle unfolding of each day, while iron slowly revealed its hidden strength in the furnace. Life in the home carried a warmth just as essential, a steady glow that nurtured families, culture, and the quiet traditions that anchored them through changing times. Morning in an Iron Age home began with softness. Before the first rays of sunlight crept over the hills, a faint scent of embers lingered in the air. The hearth, carefully tended the night before, still held a whisper of warmth beneath its ashes. Smoke curled upward lazily when stirred, and the first sparks of the new day flickered into being. For families across early villages, the hearth was more than a place of cooking. It was the centre of life, a steady companion through every season. Raina knelt near the fire pit inside her dwelling, brushing ash aside with a calm familiarity. With practiced hands, she added dry twigs and blew gently, coaxing the embers into a soft glow. Within moments, flames rose in a quiet dance, casting amber light against the woven mats and clay jars lining the walls. The home's simple furnishings, wooden bowls, carved spoons, woolen blankets, glowed warmly in the flickering firelight. Outside, dawn was just beginning to colour the sky, but already the gentle hum of community life stirred in the distance. Terev entered the dwelling, carrying a small bundle of reeds from the river. His footsteps were quiet, careful not to disturb the morning calm. "The water's low today," he said softly. "Good for gathering." Raina smiled, adding a clay pot to the warming hearth. "Then perhaps today will be a good day to finish weaving that new mat." He nodded, settling beside her as the scent of warming grain filled the space. Iron Age homes varied from region to region. Some built with timber and daub, others shaped from stone, and still others woven from reeds or turf. But almost all shared the same central element, the hearth. It offered warmth through winter, a flame for cooking, and a steady source of light when night pressed close. Families gathered around it to share meals, stories, and daily tasks. While Terev and Avin continued experimenting with iron, the artisans of the village carried their own quiet pride. Raina, like many women of her community, tended to the weaving of mats, baskets, and clothing. She worked with reeds she had gathered at the riverbank, splitting them carefully and weaving them into intricate patterns that combined beauty with practicality. Her fingers moved slowly, patiently, as she worked on the mat. Terev watched her with quiet admiration. "You weave with the same calm the hearth gives you," he murmured. She smiled. "And you shape iron with the same patience the earth demands." The division of tasks in early Iron Age households was not rigid, but arose naturally from the rhythms of life. Artisans and farmers moved effortlessly between roles. A hunter might carve wooden tools in the afternoon. A farmer might help with weaving on rainy days. And in the evenings, families gathered to share stories while crafting items that supported their everyday needs. By midday, the village hummed with activity. Homes lay open to the warmth of the sun, their doorways letting in breezes scented with wildflowers and distant pine. Children ran between dwellings, carrying small tasks or simply chasing one another in bursts of laughter. Elderly villagers sat outside on low stools, mending nets or offering wisdom to anyone who paused beside them. Inside the homes, the scent of cooking filled the air. Clay pots simmered gently with grain porridge or stews of lentils and herbs. People stored food in woven baskets hung from wooden beams, or sealed in clay vessels kept cool in shaded corners. The interior spaces were designed with harmony in mind. Floors were covered in woven mats. Clay lamps provided gentle evening light. Wooden shelves held pottery of all sizes, vessels for water, jars for dried berries, bowls for shared meals. Even in the simplest dwellings, there was a sense of care in every arrangement. As afternoon faded into evening, the pace of village life softened. Crafts were set aside. Fields grew quiet. Smoke drifted upward from hearths across the settlement as families prepared their final meals of the day. Raina and Terev sat outside their home, watching the sky shift from gold to soft lavender. Avin joined them, carrying a small basket of herbs. "For the night fire," she said, "to bring calm and good dreams." They added the herbs to the hearth as it crackled warmly, releasing gentle scents of sage and sweetgrass. The flame's glow bathed the home in a soft amber light. As the night deepened, so too did the rituals that mark the close of each day. Children gathered near the hearths as elders told stories of spirits in the hills, of stars guiding lost travelers, and of ancestors who had walked the earth in ages before memory. These stories were never meant to frighten. They offered comfort, reminders that the world was full of mystery, but also full of guidance. Raina's favourite story was one her mother had told her often, of a great bird made of starlight that carried wisdom from one village to the next. "The bird sees all paths," her mother would say, "and brings light where darkness feels too deep." Tonight, Raina shared that same story with two children curled beside her mat. Their eyes shone with wonder in the firelight. Terev, meanwhile, sharpened a wooden handle that he hoped to pair with their next attempt at shaping iron. His movements were slow and thoughtful. The glow of the hearth reflected softly in his eyes. "Iron will come to us," he murmured, "when it is ready." Later, the entire village settled into a gentle quiet. Lamps flickered softly inside the dwellings. The sounds of weaving, carving, and grinding gave way to the quiet murmurs of families preparing for rest. Outside, the wind rustled the tall grasses, and the stars brightened overhead like scattered seeds of light. Inside her home, Raina lay beside the dimming fire, her mind full of the day's gentle rhythms. She listened to the soft crackle of the last embers and felt the warmth sink into her skin. She thought of the iron cooling beside the furnace, the paths that connected their village to distant lands, and the stories whispered across the world as people carried knowledge from one hearth to another. She breathed deeply, letting the night settle around her like a soft blanket. In the calm embrace of home, with its woven walls, earthen floors, and steady hearthlight, the Iron Age felt less like a moment of change and more like a quiet unfolding, a gentle becoming. And as sleep approached the village, the world beyond it continued to shift slowly, patiently, guided by the same warmth that glowed within every Iron Age home. Guided by the same warmth that glowed within every Iron Age home, the people of the village lived not only by the rhythms of nature and craft, but also by the soft, enduring power of their beliefs. Long before written texts or carved tablets preserved the wisdom of an age, communities held their stories in memory, in the voices of elders, in the gestures of ritual, and in the sacred spaces where they gathered under open skies. Belief during the early Iron Age was not loud or demanding. It whispered through the rustle of tall grasses, flickered in the dance of firelight, and shimmered in the night sky. It was felt more than declared, lived more than explained. Every family, every village held its own ways of honouring the unseen forces that guided them, the spirits of land, river, fire, and sky. One crisp morning, as a faint mist draped itself across the fields, Raina walked toward the meadow where the village held its seasonal gatherings. The air carried the cool scent of dew and early autumn leaves. The grass brushed gently against her legs as she made her way to a circle of smooth stones arranged long before her birth. Some said the stones had stood there since the ancestors first settled the valley. Others believed they marked a place where the world felt especially close to the spirits. In either case, the meadow felt different, calmer, more aware. The village was preparing for the first harvest ceremony, a gentle ritual held to thank the land for its abundance. No offerings of wealth were required, just simple gestures of gratitude, a handful of grain, a song carried on the morning breeze, a story spoken from the heart. Raina set a woven basket filled with barley at the edge of the stone circle, then paused to listen. The meadow was peaceful, yet alive with possibility. Birds hidden among the tall grasses sang in soft melodic bursts. Somewhere far off, a brook murmured over stones, and above her, the sky began to lighten with the faintest blush of dawn. As villagers slowly arrived, they carried their own small offerings. Avin brought a braid of herbs tied with a strip of cloth dyed in deep red. Terev carried a small carved figurine shaped from riverstone, a simple symbol of strength. The hearth worker brought embers from the previous night's fire, cradled in a clay vessel shaped like a blooming flower. Elders directed everyone with gentle gestures. No one raised their voice. Rituals of the time were woven from quiet respect, not command. When the ceremony began, the air shifted into a deeper stillness. The elder known for guiding these gatherings, a woman named Solara, whose hair shimmered like pale silver in the morning light, stepped into the stone circle. Her voice was soft, yet carried effortlessly across the meadow. "We gather," she began, "to honor the land that carries us, the fire that warms us, the sky that watches us, and the spirits who walk unseen between our days." The villagers bowed their heads in quiet reverence. Solara lifted her hands slightly, palms open. "May we walk gently. May we honor the hands that shaped our tools, the fields that shaped our harvest, and the spirits that shape our dreams." Her words flowed like water, soothing and slow. Raina felt her breath deepen. These gatherings always made her feel as if the world grew larger around her, yet kinder, as though she were standing in the heartbeat of something ancient. After Solara's blessing, the villagers stepped forward one by one to place their offerings at the center of the circle. Some whispered words of thanks. Others placed their items silently, trusting that their gratitude would be felt without speech. When Terev reached the center, he placed his stone carving gently upon the earth. For a moment he paused, feeling the weight of the recent changes in his life, the journey across distant lands, the discovery of early iron, the dreams of shaping stronger tools. He murmured a simple vow. "May we shape with care." Raina, placing her barley next to his offering, whispered, "May the land stay generous and our hands stay grateful." After the offerings were laid, Solara signaled for the lighting of the ceremonial fire. The hearth worker stepped forward, lifting the clay vessel containing the embers. With practiced movements, she transferred them to a small pile of dried reeds and wood at the heart of the circle. Within moments, flames curled upward, soft and golden. The scent of burning herbs drifted through the air, calming and earthy. Solara began a gentle chant, not a song of command or demand, but a melody of connection. Others joined her, voices weaving into a tapestry of soft harmony. Children hummed quietly. Elders closed their eyes, swaying with slow, thoughtful movements. To Raina, the sound felt like a river flowing through time, carrying old stories, memories of ancestors, and unspoken hopes for generations yet to come. As the chant faded, Solara raised a small bowl filled with water. "This," she said, "is for life, for the rivers that guide us, for the rains that nourish us, for the tears that remind us we feel." She sprinkled a handful of droplets over the fire. The flames hissed softly, releasing a fragrant steam that drifted upward like a prayer. Next came a bowl of grain, symbolizing abundance. Then a bowl of freshly gathered leaves, symbolizing growth. Each offering reflected a truth the villagers held dear, that life was a circle, one in which the seen and unseen flowed together. After the ritual's final blessing, the meadow gradually filled with soft conversation and gentle laughter. Families shared food and stories. Children played quietly between the stone pillars, their small footsteps echoing across centuries of tradition. Young couples whispered dreams to one another beneath the shade of tall trees. Avin wandered toward Raina and Terev, her expression thoughtful. "It is peaceful here," she said, "as if the land remembers every ceremony held before this one." Raina smiled. "Perhaps it does." Terev looked toward the rising sun. "And perhaps it remembers what we will shape in the days to come." As the morning brightened, the ceremony slowly drew to a close. Villagers collected their baskets and tools, returning home with hearts lighter than when they had arrived. The fire burned down to warm ashes. Solara remained for a moment longer, offering a silent farewell to the spirits she believed watched over them. Raina lingered too, brushing her fingers over the smooth stone at the edge of the circle. She felt connected not only to her village, but to the countless generations who had stood here before, giving thanks, seeking guidance, and honouring the unseen threads that wove their world together. The meadow exhaled a soft breeze, carrying away the last traces of smoke. And as the villagers returned to their homes and their daily work, the sacredness of the morning stayed with them, quiet, steady, always near. Just as the Iron Age continued to unfold around them, guided not only by tools and fires, but by the beliefs that anchored their hearts. Just as the Iron Age continued to unfold around them, guided not only by tools and fires, but by the beliefs that anchored their hearts, the world beyond the quiet meadow and the stone circle was beginning to shift in remarkable ways. Communities that had once lived in scattered clusters were growing, slowly, organically, into larger settlements. Paths once trodden by a handful of travellers now echoed with the steady footfall of merchants, farmers, smiths, and wanderers carrying stories from distant places. Wherever people gathered in greater numbers, a new energy took root, the soft, rhythmic clamour of early cities. Though still small by later standards, these early hubs felt alive in ways unlike rural villages. Markets formed at their centres, bustling with the hum of trade, the scent of unfamiliar spices, and the warm conversations of people who had travelled far from home. These were places where the world grew just a little closer together. When Terev, Raina, and Avin decided to visit a nearby market town for the first time after their harvest festival, they felt both excitement and gentle trepidation. Their village, though growing, remained peaceful and close-knit. The idea of a bustling marketplace filled with strangers, tools, ornaments and stories was both thrilling and unfamiliar. They set out at dawn, carrying woven baskets, dried berries, pottery and Rayna's finely crafted mats, goods to trade not only for necessities, but perhaps for knowledge. The path to the market wound through rolling hills tinted gold by late-season sunlight. As they travelled, they passed other groups headed in the same direction. A shepherd guiding his flock, a family carrying clay vessels filled with oil, a pair of young men with bundles of wool slung over their shoulders. Even smiled at the sight. It seems the whole valley moves toward the same heartbeat today. And we are part of that rhythm, Rayna replied, feeling the path's gentle energy. By late morning, they reached the outskirts of the market town. Smoke drifted upward from numerous hearths. Buildings clustered together in a loose semicircle. Near the centre rose a large open space, the market square, already brimming with people and goods. Terev paused to take it all in. It's alive. Rayna nodded, awed by the colours, scents and movement. Like a river of people. They stepped through the entrance, greeted immediately by the warm aroma of baked bread and roasted barley. Merchants called softly to passers-by, offering samples or pointing toward their crafts. Children darted between stalls with bundles of herbs or small carved figurines, helping their families with trade. Everywhere, voices mingled. Familiar languages mixed with accents from distant regions, creating a gentle hum that rose and fell like waves. Rayna felt an instant pull toward the pottery stalls, where beautifully shaped vessels stood in neat rows. Some glowed with smooth polished surfaces. Others were etched with symbols or painted with natural pigments. She traced a finger along the rim of a deep clay bowl, admiring the craftsmanship. A kindly potter noticed her interest. "Woven patterns," he said, pointing to the bowl's etched lines. "Inspired by baskets from coastal villages." Rayna smiled. "Your work carries stories from far places." He nodded warmly. "So does yours, I see." He gestured toward the mats in her basket. "Weaving like that is valued here. Textures that catch the warmth of homes." Meanwhile, Avon wandered toward a stall where metal tools glinted in the sunlight. She lifted an iron knife, its edge sharp and smooth. The merchant, a woman with calloused hands and kind eyes, explained, "Made by smiths who learned from the mountain tribes. Hard metal, well cooled." Terev joined her, holding the knife gently. "This is finer than anything we've shaped." "Yes," the merchant said with a hint of pride. "But each village learns in its own time. Iron listens to patience as much as fire." Rayna joined them soon after, carrying a new clay pot she had traded for. The potter had admired her mat and insisted they exchange crafts. "I felt his gratitude," she said softly. "Gratitude travels far in places like this," Avon replied. The trio spent hours wandering through the square. They saw smiths demonstrating simple forging techniques, pounding small pieces of glowing iron upon stone anvils. They watched bead makers shape ornaments from coloured stones and glass-like sands. They smelled herbs rare to their own valley, some sharp like pine, others sweet like honey. In one corner of the market, travellers from the north displayed woven cloaks lined with animal fur, perfect for colder regions. In another, river merchants offered dried fish, salt, shells, and river reeds that could be woven into strong baskets. But perhaps most striking were the traders whose goods carried stories from truly distant lands. One man spoke of markets by the sea, where boats arrived from islands unknown to most villagers. Another described wide plains filled with roaming herds, where hunters shaped iron spearheads thinner than reeds. A woman from the south told tales of fortified towns with walls built from large stones that shimmered in sunlight. Terev felt his world expand with every story. Even felt her curiosity deepen. Raina felt her heart open wider, as though each new voice carried a breeze from another horizon. Near the center of the market square, musicians played simple wooden flutes and drums, their melodies rising gently above the hum of trade. Children danced in loose circles, while parents watched with soft smiles. The music created a moment of unity, a reminder that behind all goods and tools and stories were the same human hearts seeking connection. As the sun began to lower, casting warm amber tones across the market, the trio gathered near a quiet corner of the square to rest. They shared a small meal purchased from a vendor, warm flatbread filled with herbs and soft cheese. The flavors were simple, yet comforting. Terev exhaled slowly. This place, it shows how much the world is changing. Raina nodded. Change shaped by hands, just like ours. Avon looked toward a smith hammering iron in rhythmic strokes. And change shared by everyone who walks these paths. They gathered their traded goods, new tools, herbs, pottery, a fur-lined cloth from the north, and prepared for the walk home. The market was still alive, though its sounds softened as evening settled. Merchants stored their goods, children helped fold wicker mats, and elders sat by small fires, recounting the day's exchanges. Before leaving, Terev stopped at a stall displaying iron chisels. He purchased a small one, not because he needed it immediately, but because it represented what they could one day shape themselves. This, he said quietly to Raina and Even, is a promise, a reminder. They understood without needing further explanation. As they walked back along the familiar path, the sky filled with streaks of rose and violet. The market's hum faded into the distance, replaced by the gentle chorus of frogs, the rustle of wind through tall grasses, and the peace of returning home with new knowledge, new tools, and renewed inspiration. Torchlights glimmered across their village as they approached, welcoming them with warmth. Children spotted them first, running forward with delighted calls. Elders greeted them with gentle curiosity about their trades and stories. Raina placed her new clay bowl beside the hearth. Avon unwrapped the herbs she had purchased, preparing to hang them near the furnace. Terev set the iron chisel carefully near the tools they had shaped themselves. Home felt even warmer now, enriched by the world beyond. And as night settled, filling the sky with stars, the village rested with hearts full of quiet wonder. For the growing cities and soft clamour of markets had shown them that the Iron Age was not merely a new era of metal, but a widening horizon of humanity. For the growing cities and soft clamour of markets had shown them that the Iron Age was not merely a new era of metal, but a widening horizon of humanity, one where distant lands were no longer abstract mysteries, but places connected by shared craftsmanship, ambition, and story. Beyond the valleys and forests, across wide plains and winding rivers, great civilizations were stirring along the shores of a brilliant inland sea, a place the world would one day call the Mediterranean. Though Rayna, Terev, and Avin had never travelled so far, the stories reaching their village spoke of these distant cultures with a sense of awe, as though the very air around them shimmered with promise. Here, iron had begun to shape the rise of city-states, the growth of trade networks, and the formation of early political power. To understand the breadth of the Iron Age, one had to imagine these distant shores waking under a dawn of their own. Greece with its rugged islands, Carthage with its bustling harbours, and Rome with its determined heartbeat gradually growing stronger. In the lands that would one day be known for philosophers and poets, early Iron Age communities were already discovering the transformative power of the new metal. The Greek world was not yet the tapestry of mighty polis, city-states it would become, but its foundations were forming in clusters of hillside villages and coastal settlements. Imagine those landscapes in their early mornings, olive trees shimmering in soft light, goats grazing across steep terraces, the scent of herbs drifting through narrow paths shaped by countless footsteps. In these settlements, iron slowly replaced bronze as the preferred metal for tools and weapons. Farmers used iron-tipped ploughs to break up rocky soil, allowing fields to expand. Shepherds carried iron knives at their belts, their edges sharper and more reliable than anything before. Iron changed daily life here in simple but powerful ways. With better tools, agriculture grew more efficient. With more reliable blades, shipbuilders crafted stronger vessels that cut through waves with grace and purpose. And with these vessels, communities along different islands and shores grew more connected than ever. Stories reached Terev's village describing blacksmiths on Greek hillsides working in small stone workshops. Flames roared in bellows-fed hearths. Sparks flew as hammers struck white-hot iron against smooth anvils. Every sound was a step toward a future of expanding cities, rising trade, and deepening culture. Some merchants passing through the local trade routes even carried Greek-made blades, elegant, slender, beautifully crafted. Even had once held one during their travels and felt the difference immediately. It was balanced, its edge gleaming even under faint light. "It feels like a living thing," she had whispered. Indeed, in Greece, iron was becoming not only a tool of survival, but a symbol of craftsmanship and identity. Travel westward across the sea. Imagine the waves turning from deep blue to shimmering gold in the afternoon sun, and you would reach Carthage, a city that had begun to rise as a powerful centre of trade and seafaring innovation. Carthage was a place of bustling harbours, tall ships, and markets overflowing with goods from Africa, Spain, Sicily, and distant Sardinia. Iron flowed into the city in steady streams, in raw lumps, in refined bars, and in tools crafted by expert metalworkers whose skills were renowned across the region. If one were to walk through an early Carthaginian market, they would hear the rhythmic clatter of artisans shaping iron into sturdy tools. Farmers from surrounding lands traded their harvests for iron ploughshares. Builders from far communities purchased iron nails and chisels for future construction. Traders carried iron goods aboard their ships as currency, exchanging them across the Mediterranean world. Carthage had always been shaped by the sea, but with iron tools, its shipwrights took their craft to new heights. They built sleek vessels designed for trade, wide-hulled, steady in open water, capable of carrying heavy cargo across vast distances. And with each improved ship, the city expanded its influence further. Some of the travelling merchants who shared stories with Rayna's village described Carthage as a place where the air smells of salt and the sound of hammers never sleeps. They spoke of markets where iron blades glinted in the sunlight, stacked neatly beside baskets of olives, honey, and dyed cloth. Terev often listened to these tales with quiet fascination. "Iron makes them strong," he once said, "but it also makes them connected to the sea, to trade, to one another." He sensed that iron had become more than a tool for Carthage. It was part of the city's identity, woven into its prosperity and its dreams. Far to the north of Carthage, across rolling hills and winding rivers, early Rome was beginning to rise, not yet the grand empire of history, but a small collection of settlements perched upon gentle hills along the banks of the Tiber River. In these early days, Rome was still humble, shaped by simple homes, farms, and workshops. But even here, iron had begun quietly shaping society. Ploughmakers, blacksmiths, and carpenters worked with iron tools that allowed them to cultivate land more effectively, build sturdier structures, and strengthen their early defenses. Iron farming implements spread across the region, helping communities harvest grain more efficiently and support growing populations. Simple iron hinges, nails, and clamps strengthened wooden doorways and carts. And early Roman smiths, inspired by techniques learned from neighboring peoples, began crafting iron blades that would later evolve into tools and weapons recognized throughout history. The stories reaching Rayna's village described Rome not as a place of grandeur, but one of determination. "They are builders," travelers said. "Builders of roads, builders of homes, builders of traditions." Even imagined young Roman smiths laboring over a furnace much like theirs, feeding flames, shaping blades, learning from small mistakes, celebrating small successes. "They sound like us," she said one night, shaping their future one ember at a time. Terev nodded, "And perhaps one day our tools will be just as strong." What fascinated the villagers most was the idea that Rome, Greece, and Carthage were not isolated worlds, but points on a growing web of exchange. Iron was weaving their fates together, strengthening their trade, supporting their growth, and guiding their stories across land and sea. When travelers from these distant shores journeyed back along trade routes toward Rayna and Terev's quiet valley, they brought not only tools and crafts, but wisdom. They described how cities rose when people united under shared purpose, how iron allowed harbour towns to expand their fleets, how stronger ploughs made once stony fields flourish, how market squares filled with languages from faraway coasts, and how, in every place touched by iron, human dreams grew larger. These tales ignited the imagination of the entire village, the hearth workers striving to build hotter furnaces, the farmers dreaming of iron ploughs, the artisans imagining new ways to shape their crafts. As Rayna listened to the stories at the evening hearth, her heart filled with something both calm and expansive. The world was vast, yes, full of cultures, seas, and cities she would never see. But it was also connected through the fire-lit glow of a shared era. Iron was the thread, fire was the needle, and humanity was stitching together a future far bigger than any one village could imagine. That night, as stars shimmered softly above the valley, the villagers drifted to sleep with a sense of belonging, not only to their home, but to a world quietly reshaping itself, one glowing ember at a time. One glowing ember at a time, the Iron Age spread outward across continents, touching the Mediterranean shores with rising cities, while also travelling northward into lands shaped by deep forests, misty hills, and ancient stone. These northern realms, home to the ancestors of the Celts, the early peoples of Scandinavia, and countless smaller tribes, were worlds defined by wind and wood, river and rock, and an intimacy with nature so profound it coloured every story, every tool, and every breath. If the south was warmed by the hum of markets and the crash of sea waves, the north was cradled by quiet strength, the kind found in towering pines, hidden glens, and long winters that taught patience and endurance. Though Terev, Raina and Avin had never walked these vast lands, their village often welcomed travellers who carried tales of the distant north, stories wrapped in fog, starlight, and the soft growl of winter winds. Far to the western north, lands rich with rolling hills and oak forests were home to Celtic tribes whose identities were woven through myth, craft, and oral tradition. These were places where rivers curved like silver ribbons, where mists clung to valleys at dawn, and where stone circles stood silently against the changing seasons. Here, the arrival of iron brought transformation both practical and symbolic. Celtic smiths were known for their artistry long before iron arrived, crafting intricate designs in bronze and gold. But when iron entered their world, these artisans embraced it with reverence. They believed smiths were touched by something sacred, that shaping metal was a conversation with the earth's deepest mysteries. In small workshops lit by flickering torchlight, Celtic metalworkers heated iron until it glowed like an ember, then hammered it into tools, ornaments, and blades with remarkable finesse. Their work bore swirling patterns inspired by wind, water, and the spiraling shapes of nature. Even the simplest iron knife might carry gentle curves and elegant lines. Travellers described with wonder how Celtic farms thrived with the help of stronger ploughs and axes, how their warriors carried iron-tipped spears decorated with small charms, and how their storytellers sang tales of magical swords forged by gods or heroes. Avin often repeated these stories to the children in the village. "They believe iron remembers every hand that touches it," she would say, her voice warm, "and that a blade carries not only strength, but spirit." Raina would smile, imagining the distant hills shrouded in morning mist, alive with quiet rituals and the music of flutes echoing through forest paths. Further still, where the land met cold, restless seas, early Scandinavian tribes lived in long wooden houses with grass roofs, nestled at the edges of dense pine forests. Their days were shaped by the tides, the migration of animals, and the changing colours of the northern sky. Iron arrived in these lands more slowly, carried through trade routes that stretched like distant veins across Europe. But once it took root, it changed life in these rugged regions in subtle but powerful ways. In coastal settlements, blacksmiths built small furnaces sheltered from harsh winds. Using techniques adapted to their climate, they crafted sturdy iron nails, fishing hooks, and simple tools that could cut through the thick, resin-filled wood of pine and spruce. Axe heads grew sharper, allowing people to fell trees more efficiently and carve out longboats that would one day carry their descendants across vast seas. Imagine the crisp sound of those early axes as they struck frozen logs under winter skies, the sound echoing across fjords. Imagine the glow inside the warm hearths, where families gathered around bowls of smoked fish and barley, listening to the rhythmic hammering of distant smiths. Travellers to Rayna's village often describe the north as a place of strength, not just physical, but spiritual. Their winters are long, one trader said softly. Their nights stretch further than ours, but they carry a fire inside them that never dims. Terev wondered what it must feel like to live in a land where iron was shaped under skies powdered with snow, where the sea was both a barrier and a guide. Between the Celtic west and the Scandinavian north lay countless smaller tribes scattered across the woodlands of Central Europe, peoples who built roundhouses from timber, who travelled along quiet forest paths, and who believed deeply in the spirits of trees, rivers, and the wind. Here, iron arrived in gentle whispers. Families would gather stones near riverbeds, searching for dark pieces that felt heavier than they looked. Smiths experimented with small furnaces lined with clay, shaping simple tools that supported daily tasks, cutting wood, preparing food, building shelters. In these communities, iron was precious. A single iron blade might be shared among multiple families. Tools were cared for with deep respect, sharpened carefully and stored safely beside hearths. Iron ornaments, small rings, pins, or amulets, were worn with pride and passed down through generations. Avin often thought about these forest tribes, imagining what their homes must feel like. Warm, fragrant with herbs and pine, walls lined with wooden carvings depicting rivers and deer. They probably feel very close to the land, she said one evening. Every tool they make must feel like a small miracle. Rayna nodded. And every day must feel like a gift. What amazed the villagers most about these northern realms was not the differences in climate or landscape, but the similarities of spirit. Whether Celtic, Scandinavian, or part of the many forest tribes in between, people in the north lived with the same gentle desires as those in Rayna's valley, to shape the land with care, to protect their families, to honour the unseen, to craft tools that made life warmer, safer, and more possible, and above all, to learn. Travellers often brought iron objects forged in the north, small blades, ornaments, or tools whose surfaces bore patterns unique to their homeland. Sometimes they traded them for barley or pottery. Sometimes they gifted them freely to express gratitude for shelter and shared meals. Terev studied these pieces with admiration. Iron speaks many languages, he murmured, but its heart is the same. Rayna traced her fingers across a Celtic-patterned brooch one traveller gifted her. She felt the grooves and swirls, each one shaped with intention and story. Every line feels like it has meaning, she whispered. It does, Avin replied. Someone shaped it with days of work and years of learning. As tales of the northern realms flowed through their village, the people realized something profound. The Iron Age was not unfolding in one place alone. It was spreading like dawn light across continents, softly, gently, illuminating each region at its own pace. Each community learned in its own way. Each smith discovered secrets of fire and metal through trial and patience. Each family shaped its home around the tools they could build. And each story travelling along the trade routes, whether from Greek cities, Carthaginian harbours, Celtic forests, or Scandinavian coasts, wove humanity closer together. For Rayna, Terev, and Avin, these stories were lanterns in the night, guiding their understanding of a world far larger than they could see. And as they listened, they felt their own role in this unfolding age, small yet meaningful, gentle yet essential. The northern winds carried whispers of iron, the forests carried songs of craft, and the people carried hearts full of quiet determination. As the Iron Age deepened, warmed, and reached across the ancient world like a long, slow breath. As the Iron Age deepened, warmed, and reached across the ancient world like a long, slow breath, its glow drifted not only westward and northward, but far to the east, into lands shaped by vast deserts, towering mountains, monsoon winds, and ancient civilizations, whose histories stretched back into the dawn of time. These were worlds of great kingdoms and small forest villages, of river valleys rich with life, and of trade routes that wound across continents like threads waiting to be woven. Travellers who visited Raina, Terev, and Evan's village spoke of these eastern realms with wide, reverent eyes, as though they had glimpsed a horizon so expansive that words could only brush its edges. They carried tales filled with shimmering colour, powerful rulers, wise artisans, and ironcraft more advanced than anything the villagers yet imagined. And as the villagers gathered by the evening hearth to listen, the firelight flickering against their faces, these stories expanded their understanding of the world once more. To the far southeast lay Persia, a land of sweeping plateaus, rugged mountains, and winds that smelled of sun-warmed stone. Here, iron did more than shape tools. It helped shape empires. Even before the rise of the great Persian kings, early communities had learned the art of refining iron with remarkable skill. They built furnaces lined with heat-resistant clay, designed to draw in air from the desert winds. Their smiths, practiced and patient, crafted both delicate ornaments and sturdy tools. Travellers spoke of Persian farmers guiding ploughs tipped with iron across fields that stretched toward distant horizons. They described roads paved with gravel, connecting settlements with impressive efficiency, and they spoke of soldiers carrying iron-tipped spears designed for strength and reliability. But perhaps most striking was the Persian reverence for order, a belief that harmony could be woven through land, law, and craft. Iron tools, some traders claimed, played a quiet role in this vision. They supported agriculture, helped construct storage buildings, and strengthened wagons that travelled across long distances. A storyteller once told Raina's village, "In Persia, when a smith strikes the metal, they whisper a blessing. They believe the iron remembers every word." Raina imagined a smith standing before a desert furnace, sand swirling gently around their feet, speaking softly to the glowing metal. "Iron carries memory," she murmured one evening. "Perhaps that is why it feels alive." Terev nodded. And perhaps the memory of these distant lands lives in every tool that travels along the trade routes. Further east still lay a land shaped by powerful rivers, the Indus and the Ganges, where early civilizations had thrived for centuries. This region held some of the world's earliest examples of advanced metallurgy. Long before the Iron Age flourished elsewhere, people here had shaped copper, bronze, and later iron with extraordinary skill. The stories reaching the village spoke of bustling river cities where homes were built with precision, streets were planned, and wells tapped into cool underground water. Iron, when it arrived in greater use, became an essential part of these thriving communities. Travellers described blacksmiths working beneath broad trees, sheltered from the sun. Their furnaces glowed bright as stars, fueled by charcoal made from carefully tended wood. These smiths crafted iron tools for farming rice and wheat, for woodworking, and for shaping stone into architectural wonders. But India was known not only for its craft, it was known for its colour. Merchants spoke of cloth dyed in vibrant hues, deep blues, warm oranges, bright reds. They described markets filled with spices, fragrant enough to perfume the entire square. And in some regions, they said, iron was even used in early forms of delicate decorative work. Thin, beautifully shaped pieces that adorned belts, jewellery, and ceremonial objects. One travelling trader once visited Rayna's village carrying a small, beautifully crafted iron pin from the east. Its surface bore tiny engraved lines forming a pattern like rippling water. Rayna held it carefully, feeling its smoothness against her fingertips. "It feels like a river," she whispered. "It is from a land of rivers," the trader replied with a smile. Even marvelled at how such distant artistry could feel so familiar. "Even across great distances," she said, "people shape metal the same way they shape stories, with love." Before the famous Silk roads carried cloth, spices and treasures across continents, earlier trade routes connected the Eastern world in quieter, simpler ways. Paths carved by herders, hunters, and early merchants linked distant villages to emerging cities. Over generations, these paths grew into lifelines. Through these routes, knowledge of iron travelled steadily. From Persia into the mountains, from the mountains into the northern plains, from the plains into India's river valleys, and then back again, carried by traders guided by stars and seasons. Some travellers described caravans with dozens of people journeying together, families, merchants, smiths, and storytellers sharing warmth by firelight at night. They exchanged goods, ideas, and songs, weaving a cultural tapestry that stretched far beyond any one region. Terev listened to these accounts with awe. "The world feels larger than we can imagine," he murmured. "And yet connected," Rayna added, "as though every path meets another in time." Not all Eastern ironwork came from grand cities. In the high mountains, regions so remote that snow covered the paths for much of the year, small villages developed unique ironworking traditions of their own. This iron was often born from necessity. In cold mountain climates, stronger tools were vital for cutting frozen wood, shaping shelters, and hunting large animals. Travellers spoke of smiths who built furnaces into the sides of cliffs to shield them from harsh winds. They heated iron to glowing brightness, then cooled it in icy water collected from melting snow. The rapid change in temperature created metal of surprising hardness. Some mountain ironworkers even mixed their metal with trace minerals found in their region, creating tools with subtle, unique colours, faint blues, greys, or reddish tints that reflected the stone around them. Avon once remarked, "It is as if the mountains themselves lend their colours to the metal." Terev smiled. "And their strength." The stories of Persia, India, and eastern mountain ranges brought quiet wonder into Rayna's village. Each evening, after the day's work was done, the villagers gathered by the fire to hear new tales shared by travellers. Some stories were full of awe, empires rising, cities glowing with lantern light, markets stretching as far as the eye could see. Others were humble, small mountain communities crafting beautiful tools from meagre resources. What touched the villagers most was the sense that everywhere, despite differences in language, climate, or belief, people were learning the same quiet lesson. Iron was a companion, a challenge, a teacher. It taught patience and precision. It rewarded perseverance, and it connected communities through shared craft. Raina often sat beside the fire, turning an iron tool in her hands, imagining its journey. "We shape iron," she whispered, "but iron shapes us too." As night deepened and stars filled the sky, the villagers drifted into sleep with the warmth of these distant stories glowing gently within them. Stories carried across continents, through deserts and river valleys, over mountains and plains, by travelers who followed the eastern horizons softened by time. Stories carried across continents, through deserts and river valleys, over mountains and plains, by travelers who followed the eastern horizons, softened by time. And as these stories settled into the hearts of Raina, Terev, Avin, and their village, something subtle but profound began to take shape, not only within their home, but across the entire ancient world. The Iron Age, once a whisper in small valleys and hidden hearths, had grown into a great turning of human history. Innovation no longer lived in a single place. Discovery was no longer contained to isolated communities. Instead, knowledge moved like wind, crossing borders, traveling along rivers, drifting over mountains, weaving its way into cultures both vast and humble. Everywhere people were learning from one another. Everywhere, ideas were being exchanged with a gentleness that built bridges long before anyone carved stone roads or raised grand monuments. And the world, once scattered into countless quiet pockets, was beginning to feel connected. As villages, towns, and early cities experimented with iron, the tools they created reshaped daily life in ways both practical and deeply human. Farmers across continents found that iron plowshares cut deeper into soil than wooden or bronze blades. They discovered they could cultivate larger fields, support bigger families, and store more grain for winter. With this stability came time to weave more carefully, carve more beautifully, and gather more often for ritual and celebration. Terev felt the truth of this transformation most clearly when the village's furnace finally produced its first truly workable iron blade. It was small and simple, but it held its edge through an entire morning of cutting reeds, an achievement that would have been impossible only seasons before. Raina held the blade gently, turning it under the sunlight. "It feels like the earth's strength," she murmured. "It is," Terev replied with quiet awe. "The earth and our learning." From that moment, everything felt possible. The villagers sharpened wooden handles, shaped new clay molds, gathered stones for building stronger furnace walls, and built small shelters for storage and craft. Children watched with wide eyes, sensing that they were living through a moment future generations would speak of with reverence. Meanwhile, travelers came and went with increasing frequency. They brought iron from distant lands, yes, but they also brought songs, patterns, rituals, and languages. The Iron Age, in its quiet way, encouraged people to interact more, to share more, to trust the gentle power of connection. A southern merchant brought a simple but beautiful iron hairpin, etched with delicate waves. A forest traveller carried stories of mountain festivals, where iron bells rang softly against the night sky. A caravan leader from the east shared dried spices in exchange for woven mats, describing how his homeland used iron pots to simmer stews fragrant with ginger and wild herbs. Raina found herself moved not just by the items travellers offered, but by the humanity woven into their stories. "Every piece," she told Terev, "feels like a letter from another world." Terev smiled. Then we are learning to read the world. One evening, while the hearth crackled with a calm orange glow, Avon shared stories she had gathered from travellers along the trade routes. In the Persian lands, smiths coordinated across entire regions, sharing techniques for building hotter furnaces. In Greek city-states, iron tools allowed builders to carve stone with greater precision, paving the way for temples and gathering places. In the Celtic forests, iron ornaments carried spiritual meaning, worn during rituals honouring the turning seasons. In the river kingdoms of India, artisans experimented with iron so pure it shone like polished stone. As she spoke, the village fell silent, not in fear or uncertainty, but in awe. The great turning of the Iron Age was not just technological, it was spiritual, cultural, emotional. People were learning to see themselves as part of something larger, and that sense of belonging strengthened them. As iron spread, artistry blossomed. Across the ancient world, creativity flourished in new forms. Potters used iron tools to carve finer patterns in clay. Carpenters built sturdier furniture with iron nails and chisels. Weavers incorporated iron dye mordants to create deeper colours in cloth. Sculptors shaped figures with iron blades that gave precision unreachable in earlier ages. Jewelers combined iron with bronze, gold, and bone to create intricate ornaments. These changes stirred something within Raina's heart. She found new joy in weaving patterns inspired by stories travellers shared. Her mats now carried shapes reminiscent of Greek waves, Persian geometric lines, northern spirals, and river symbols from the east. One afternoon, she held up a new mat to the sunlight. Its pattern flowed gently from one culture to another, like a tapestry of the world itself. Avon gasped softly. "It carries the whole story!" Raina smiled. "Because we do too." Terev, meanwhile, found inspiration in the metalwork of distant lands, and a renewed determination to strengthen their village's craft. With patience and care, he rebuilt the furnace a third time, using stones shaped more precisely, airflow vents arranged with greater intention, and bellows lined with thicker leather. As the villagers helped him raise the new structure, they shared stories from near and far. When the furnace was finished, they gathered for a gentle ceremony, not grand or dramatic, but full of warmth and quiet pride. When the fire finally roared to life, stronger than ever before, the entire village stood in reverent silence. The glow of the flames cast rippling light across their faces. "This," Terev whispered, "feels like the beginning of something new." Avon nodded. "A doorway opening." Raina added softly, "And we step through together." During that evening's forging, the furnace yielded iron unlike any they had shaped before, malleable, responsive, pure. The excitement was not loud, but it filled the village like a rising tide. They were part of the great turning. Their small world was linked to distant kingdoms, bustling markets, misty forests, snowy coasts, and river valleys thousands of miles away. The Iron Age had become a bridge, a gentle one, connecting people through shared challenges and shared triumphs. Later that night, after the fire had cooled to a deep glow, the villagers gathered beneath a sky full of shimmering stars. The air was warm, still, and full of possibility. Raina rested her head against Terev's shoulder. Evin sat quietly nearby, tracing patterns in the dust. The furnace crackled faintly behind them. "What do you think the world will look like in 100 years?" Raina asked softly. Terev gazed upward. I think people will build things we cannot yet imagine, and share stories we cannot yet dream, Avin added. Raina closed her eyes, letting the night settle around her. I hope they walk gently, she whispered, the way we try to. Above them, the stars shone like tiny hearth fires scattered across the sky, each one a reminder that the world was vast, but full of light. The Iron Age was not merely a time of tools and metal. It was a time of connection, of learning, of becoming. And as the village drifted into sleep, the great turning continued quietly across continents, carried by hearts reaching toward one another, and by hands shaping new futures from the glow of fire. Carried by hearts reaching toward one another, and by hands shaping new futures from the glow of fire, the Iron Age continued its quiet spread across continents. Innovation flourished, communities grew, and cultures intertwined. Yet even as iron became a trusted companion in daily life, the world itself was entering a time of great shifts. Empires began to form, expand, and transform. Landscapes that had once been ruled only by wind and river now felt the footsteps of organized armies, merchant caravans, rulers, and dreamers. But beneath these sweeping changes, the rhythm of ordinary life remained gentle. In fields, workshop huts, mountain villages, and coastal homes, people still lived by the rising sun and the warmth of hearth fires. They shaped metal, whispered stories, and tended the earth. Amid the rise and fall of distant empires, human beings continued to seek safety, purpose, and connection. This was the age when old metals began to fade, not lost to time, but woven quietly into memory, their strength surpassed by the endurance of iron. For thousands of years, bronze had shaped human civilization. It had formed the blades that tilled the first large fields, the ornaments worn in ancient rituals, and the tools used to build early cities. Bronze had been revered, beautiful, workable, and precious. But bronze relied on resources that were limited: copper and tin. Tin especially was rare, often found only in isolated deposits. As populations grew, trade routes stretched thinner. Empires emerging across the Mediterranean and the Near East needed tools and weapons in greater numbers than ever before. And as demand grew, bronze became more difficult to sustain. Iron, on the other hand, was abundant. Found in vast deposits across plains, valleys, forests, and mountains, it offered something bronze could not: stability, a future not limited by scarcity, but guided by knowledge. As iron working improved, bronze gradually stepped back, not fully disappearing, but taking on different roles. It remained in ornaments, ceremonial pieces, and finely crafted luxury goods. But for ploughs, weapons, tools, nails, and everyday necessities, iron became the heart of an age. Travellers passing through Raina and Terev's village shared stories of regions where bronze foundries fell silent, their fires replaced by newer furnaces glowing hotter than anything before. Bronze still sings, one elder smith told them during a visit, but iron carries the song further. Raina found the thought beautiful, not a replacement, but a transformation. Far from the village's peaceful fields, great powers were growing. In the Mediterranean, the Greek city-states were spreading through the Aegean, driven by trade, exploration, and shared culture. Their iron-tipped spears, once simple tools of defense, now shaped the course of their ambitious expansions. Further west, Rome, once a modest settlement on the Tiber River, had begun asserting its strength. Roads paved with stone, tools forged from iron, and the discipline of its early legions helped the city extend its influence across neighboring territories. Travelers described Rome not just as a place of armies, but as a place of builders. They carved roads through forests, one merchant said. They raised walls of stone taller than a man, another added. And everywhere, iron supports their work. Meanwhile, to the east, the rising Persian empires unified vast stretches of land, ruling with systems of order, respect, and immense administrative skill. Their iron tools strengthened agriculture across the empire, allowing large cities to flourish under the protection of organized governance. Even in India, powerful kingdoms grew along the river plains, shaped by iron tools that supported agriculture and magnificent architectural projects. To Raina's village, these empires felt distant, like constellations across a far horizon, beautiful and significant, but too far away to touch. Yet their presence shaped the currents of trade and knowledge that gently reached even the valley's quiet hearths. Empires rise, Avon mused one evening as she traced patterns in the dust beside the fire. But villages still grow grain, weave cloth, and raise children. And iron serves both, Terev said softly. As iron spread, it did more than strengthen tools and weapons. It became a bridge, linking cultures through shared craft. Smiths from different lands began learning new techniques from one another. Some adopted bellows fashioned from animal skins. Others built taller furnaces. Some learned to temper iron more gently, cooling it slowly to increase resilience. Others shaped iron ornaments with geometric precision inspired by faraway cultures. Travelers described blacksmiths meeting across trade routes to compare methods, sometimes using gestures and charcoal drawings to overcome language barriers. One night, a wandering smith arrived at the village, carrying small pieces of patterned iron. Early attempts at metal, layered for strength and beauty. He spoke gently as he held them near the fire. This took many tries, he admitted. The metal had to be folded, hammered, heated, cooled, and folded again. It is stubborn, but when it listens, it becomes something more. Raina listened with quiet awe, imagining the patience such craftsmanship required. Avon turned the patterned metal in her hands. Like weaving, she whispered, but with fire. Terev nodded. And with time. Though the transformation of the Iron Age brought strength and innovation, some old traditions began to fade. Not disappear, simply soften into memory. Bronzesmiths retrained as ironsmiths. The old molds used for casting bronze were stored away or repurposed. Rituals centered around bronze tools shifted toward new ceremonies, blessing iron ones. Villages that once displayed bronze ornaments now wore iron pins and necklaces, crafted simply but with meaning. Some elders mourned the change. Bronze was the metal of our ancestors, they said. Its glow carried their stories. But younger generations embraced the possibilities iron offered. Not only stronger tools, but wider horizons, deeper connections, and a sense of belonging to a world that was transforming together. Raina found herself caught gently between both feelings. She respected the past and cherished old stories, yet she felt excited each time she watched the furnace glow brighter or saw Terev shape a new tool. Iron does not erase our history, she said one evening as the fire flickered softly. It carries it forward. As the Iron Age matured, even greater shifts loomed in the distance. Changes that would eventually usher in new architectural heights, established kingdoms, and later eras shaped by philosophy, science, and exploration. But Rayna's village, like countless small communities across the world, continued to move gently with the flow of time. They shaped their tools, honored their spirits, told their stories, and watched the sky for signs of weather and wonder. Daily life remained simple and steady, even as distant empires grew and old metals faded into softer memory. One night, as Terev and Rayna sat beneath the stars with Even nearby, they shared a moment of reflection. "The world is changing," Even whispered. "It always is," Terev replied gently. "But some things remain." Rayna leaned into him, her voice soft, like fire, like home, like the hope we carry into tomorrow. And as the village fell asleep beneath a sky shimmering with ancient light, the Iron Age continued its quiet turning, carrying humanity toward an ending as gentle as it had begun. Carrying humanity toward an ending as gentle as it had begun, the Iron Age moved slowly into its twilight. Not an abrupt change, nor a sudden shift, but a soft transition, like the dimming of a long day into dusk, or the way embers glow quietly long after a fire has given its brightest light. Even as new possibilities gathered beyond the horizon, possibilities that would one day shape great kingdoms, stone roads, soaring architecture, and knowledge carried in written words, the world still lived in the warm, familiar rhythm of villages like Rayna and Terev's. Their story did not end because an age changed. Instead, it folded gracefully into the next chapter of human life, just as countless communities did across the ancient world. The morning after the travelers shared tales of powerful empires and fading bronze, the village woke as it always had, to the soft crackle of rekindled hearths, to children calling sleepily for food, to farmers stepping out into golden fields washed in newborn light. Life continued, the true heartbeat of any age. In the seasons that followed, the iron furnace in Rayna's village became a place of learning, patience, and pride. Terev and Avin worked side by side with the hearth workers, refining their methods with each passing moon. They learned to listen to the metal's quiet signals, the way it softened at certain temperatures, the patterns it formed when cooled slowly, the colours that revealed its nature. Families came to watch, drawn not by spectacle, but by belonging. Children sat near the furnace, tracing spirals in the dirt while listening to stories of distant lands and old fires. Elders offered gentle wisdom, reminding everyone that skill grew slowly, like roots beneath the earth. One afternoon, after months of careful practice, Terev shaped the village's first full iron ploughshare, smooth, sturdy, and beautifully balanced. When Rayna ran her hand along its cool surface, she felt a swell of emotion so warm it almost startled her. "It feels like a promise," she whispered. He smiled softly. "A promise we made to the land and to each other." With the iron plough, fields that once felt stubborn opened more easily. The soil turned with less strain. Harvests grew. Families felt more secure as months of hard work yielded better grain, greater food stores, and deeper gratitude. The iron was not magic, but the possibilities it created were. And yet, even as their tools strengthened, the soul of the village remained unchanged. They still gathered for ceremonies beneath the stone circle. They still wove mats, carved spoons, told stories, and guided children with patient hearts. Progress did not sweep away their traditions. It simply settled among them like another form of warmth. Beyond the peaceful valley, the world continued its slow transformation. Empires expanded, new lands were explored, distant cultures met in ways both gentle and profound. Roads improved, markets grew louder, scripts emerged to record words that once lived only in memory. Historians today might describe this as the turning toward classical antiquity, a new stage of human civilization. But to the people living then, it felt far simpler, the gradual unfolding of life like petals opening toward the sun. One evening, travellers returned to the village with fresh tales, stories of cities illuminated by fire torches at night, libraries filled with early scrolls, and ships so large they carried hundreds across shimmering seas. They spoke of iron tools carving stone temples, iron chisels shaping symbols, iron nails fastening beams for larger homes. Even listened with fascination, but recognized something deeper beneath these accounts. All these places, she murmured to Raina, they grow with the same hopes we have. Stronger tools, safer homes, fuller harvests. Perhaps that is what ties the world together. Raina nodded. Perhaps we are all learning to hold the earth with gentler hands. And though neither woman had ever stepped beyond the plain surrounding their home, they felt connected to people thousands of miles away, smiths who hammered iron in Greek workshops, farmers guiding iron ploughs through Persian soil, artisans in India shaping delicate iron ornaments, and northern tribes carving wood with iron-tipped tools by torchlight. Humanity was no longer a cluster of isolated sparks. It was a growing constellation, each community shining in its own way, yet connected through shared learning, shared fire, and shared hope. As the Iron Age reached its twilight, new materials, ideas, and technologies quietly gathered on the horizon. Steel, stronger still, born from iron's refinement, would one day reshape armies and architecture. Writing systems, mathematics, and large-scale political structures would guide the classical world. But none of this felt abrupt, not to the villagers, not to people living their simple, steady lives. Ages, after all, do not end dramatically. They fade like shadows at dusk. They settle into memory. They offer gifts to the next generation, tools, stories, wisdom, and warmth. Raina sensed this gentle turning most clearly during the last harvest festival of the season. As the villagers gathered beneath the stone circle, holding grain in their palms and offering thanks to the spirits who guided them, she felt the quiet harmony of everything they had built. Children ran between the stones, the iron tools that shaped their fields, glinting faintly in the distance. Elders stood together, reflecting on years of growth and gratitude. Musicians played slow, soothing melodies, while the fire crackled softly at the circle's heart. Avin leaned close to Raina and whispered, "The world is changing again." "Yes," Raina replied, her voice warm. "But so are we, and we move with it." As twilight deepened over the valley, Teref joined them near the glowing fire. The flames illuminated his face, revealing both the youth he had once been and the wisdom he had grown into through years of shaping metal and shaping himself. He looked at Raina and Avin and said softly, "Iron brought strength to the earth, but it also brought us closer, to one another, to distant worlds, to the future. Raina rested her hand over his. And we carry its lessons forward. Above them, stars shimmered, ancient lights watching over the end of an age and the beginning of another. The wind brushed the grass with a soft murmur, as though the land itself were sighing in contentment. The Iron Age was drawing to a close, not with thunder or fear, but with a peaceful exhale. A quiet acknowledgement. A gentle passing of the torch to generations yet to come. And as the villagers walked home through the soft darkness, carrying lanterns that glowed like small constellations, they felt the future unfolding around them. Warm, welcoming, full of possibility. The hearths burned low. The fields rested in moonlight. And the world, shaped so tenderly by human hands, drifted into the quiet embrace of night, carrying forward all the hope, resilience, and gentle wonder the Iron Age had nurtured across centuries.